It's hard to know where to begin when you're sitting in a police station, surrounded by the cold hum of fluorescent lights and the steel-gray walls that echo your every breath. But I guess, like everything else about today, this has to be faced. We had the most beautiful ceremony. I remember laughing, surrounded by friends, our families embracing the love that had led us to this day. Everyone said we were perfect together, that he was lucky to find someone as committed as me. I'd be lying if I said I didn't bask in it, these glimmers of approval that made my devotion to him feel worthwhile. Except it was all a lie. As we drove to the hotel that night, his phone buzzed nonstop. "It's just work," he said, brushing it off like he always did. I should have left it alone, but something gnawed at me, a dark certainty whispering that whatever he was hiding would not stop on account of our vows. So, as he stepped out to check us in, I grabbed his phone. The name on the latest message stopped me cold. "Miss you, can't wait to see you again soon. And remember you're mine, always." My hands shook, bile creeping up my throat. I scrolled through a sea of messages, and each line revealed more: a woman from his past, a life I'd known nothing about, promises he'd whispered in secret. Photos, smiling, intimate photos that spoke to a history I'd never been part of. They'd been planning to meet after our wedding. After. My mind was racing, trapped between rage and grief, with my heart pounding a steady beat of revenge. When he returned, he could tell something was wrong. "You're quiet," he noted, reaching for my hand. But I drew away. "It's been a long day," I said, managing a weak smile. My mind, meanwhile, was already constructing a plan as if orchestrated by instinct. That night, as we walked into the suite, I asked him to pour us a celebratory drink. I was going to need it as much as he would. When he handed me my glass, his expression softened, and for a moment, he seemed vulnerable. "To us finally," he murmured, raising his glass. I met his gaze with a coldness I hadn't known I possessed. I raised mine, but it was for something far less poetic. He couldn't know what I'd slipped into his drink while he was fumbling around in the mini-fridge. It wasn't meant to kill him, just put him to sleep long enough for me to exact my revenge. I watched as his eyelids grew heavy, his face creasing in confusion. What's going on?" he slurred, gripping the edge of the table. I waited until his breathing softened, and he slumped over, helpless in his unconsciousness. Then, I grabbed his phone. She needed to know. I dialed her number. A sleepy voice answered, irritated, until I told her my name. There was a pause, a hushed disbelief that somehow she was speaking to the wife. "Stay away from my husband," I spat, fury twisting each word. But as I hung up, a part of me knew that wasn't enough. She wouldn't stay away. She never would. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on the small bouquet by the bed, a wedding gift. Its vase was heavy, decorative, and as my hand closed around it, the thought felt sharp and pure. By the time he woke up, it was too late for an apology. He came to slowly, blinking up at me as I stood over him, clutching that vase so tightly my knuckles were white. There was no escaping what had already begun. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall, slicing through the silence as I watched his eyes focus and the horror in them deepen. "Emma, what happened?" His words were slurred, his voice raw with confusion. "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice unervingly calm. "I know about her. About all of them. You made vows to me, James, and yet the entire time, you were living a double life, weren't you?" A flicker of guilt crossed his face, then fear. But just as quickly, I saw him try to recover, that same smooth talker I'd fallen in love with and married. "Emma, look, whatever you saw, it's not what you think," he started, eyes darting toward the door as if calculating his chances of getting past me. "Please, I can explain everything." I laughed, a low, bitter sound I barely recognized. "Explain? You think there's anything you can say to make this right? I trusted you, James. I believed in us." He was shaking his head, desperation painted across his face. "I was stupid, okay? I know I hurt you, but I swear, I ended things with her. It was just... I don't know. I got lost, and it was a mistake. I love you, Emma. Please, let's just talk about this." But the cold rage surging through me was relentless, icy and sharp, slicing through any remaining sympathy I might have had. "Talk." I took a step closer, raising the vase as he scrambled back. "You had your chance to talk. To be honest with me. You don't get that luxury anymore." He backed into the corner, his hands up in a pitiful attempt to shield himself. "Emma, please." The sight of him cowering there, all the power stripped away, was intoxicating. This man who'd led 2 lives, each one crafted perfectly to suit his needs, was now exposed, vulnerable, pleading. For a moment, my arm dropped, the heavy vase slipping in my hand. I thought of all we'd been through, the laughter, the plans, the future I'd believed in. I thought of the life I'd imagined, shattered now beyond repair.
"Emma, please don't," he whispered, voice breaking.
But as I looked down at him, that flicker of pity vanished. "This is for all the lies," I whispered, raising the vase again, "and for every single moment you took from me." The last sound in that room was the shattering of glass. I stared down at him, the broken vase slipping from my blood-slick hands onto the floor, shards scattering around him like petals from a twisted bouquet. Everything was still. His eyes, once so full of confidence and charm, stared blankly at nothing. And suddenly, it was as if the weight of the world had finally lifted, leaving me floating in a strange hollow calm. The room was quiet, save for the ragged beat of my heart pounding in my ears. The wedding decorations, the glowing lights, the champagne chilling on the counter, it all seemed surreal, like a setup for a scene from someone else's life. This was supposed to be our beginning.
Instead, it was the end.
I turned away from him, needing air, needing clarity. I caught sight of myself in the mirror, a bride in white, speckled in crimson, a haunting vision. I reached for the bedside phone with numb fingers, almost on instinct. I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about anything but the truth that was finally laid bare. I dialed 911, each ring stretching out into eternity, until a calm voice crackled on the other end. 911, what's your emergency?
For a moment, I didn't speak.
Then, in a voice that didn't feel like my own, I answered. I'd like to report a murder. The words hung in the air, stark and final, and with them, the reality of what I'd done came crashing down. My revenge had claimed everything. My husband, my life, my freedom. But as I was led away, sirens wailing and flashing lights illuminating the dark streets, I felt nothing but a strange, quiet satisfaction. Because he was right about one thing, I had finally, irrevocably, become his forever.